Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome from Electus and NATPE Board Co-Chair, Chris Grant.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to NATPE 2012. As you know, there's incredible change within the global television marketplace, and with that change always comes tremendous opportunity. With new distribution platforms constantly emerging and evolving, the power and importance of great ideas has never been more paramount. NATPE has not only kept pace with the industry's evolution, but has truly embraced these developments to create a better and more productive environment for all of us. What was once the forum for the domestic syndication business has now transformed into America's content market, serving the worldwide community. NATPE is an open forum market that provides us with the tools to buy and sell in the best way possible. NATPE is important to us not only for the deals that we make while we're here, but for its role as a catalyst for education and discussion of what is happening within our industry. This year at NATPE, we welcome an exceptional list of attendees and participants from all over the world, including the top television and studio executives, financiers and content creators, as well as the brightest creative minds from advertising and marketing agencies. In keynotes and intimate conversations, we'll hear from the thought leaders of our industry, including Yahoo's Ross Levinsohn, Viacom's Doug Herzog, Disney's Jimmy Pitaro, and my very own Electus's Ben Silverman. It's also important to recognize the members of the media who come to NATPE each year to not only help us tell our stories, but to moderate and participate in our conversation about how we can achieve success today and strive for growth tomorrow. Thank you especially for attending. It is your participation that continues to make NATPE so vital to our industry. With that said, I sincerely hope that everybody here has a very, very successful market in 2012. And now, I'm privileged to introduce the individual who's responsible for bringing us together today. His commitment and his dedication to NATPE is evident in every aspect of this conference. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome President and CEO of NATPE, Rick Feldman.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chris. I appreciate it. So, if it's true that healthy competition is the ingredient which forces people and companies to think smarter, work harder, and act quicker, then we're all in for an exciting 2012. All of you here today are experiencing in your business the normal forces of evolution combined with extraordinary forces of a technological revolution. These forces conspire to put a demanding consumer in charge of choosing amongst an increasing array of new devices and connectivity options. But with all the prognostications about greater online video, improved analytics, new connected and mobile devices, and greater interactivity and social media confluences, the sky did not fall. Broadcast and cable networks continue to create original content that viewers want to watch and pay for, and that advertisers continue to want to support. And local TV stations are doing fine, thank you. NATPE's moniker of Content First continues to resonate as strong media brands from all over the world continue to produce assets which more and more are enhanced by methods of engagement which create greater context for the viewers, resulting in increased audience attention. Competition, mentioned up top, will continue to increase for the legacy brands as Yahoo, Apple, Google, Amazon, Facebook, etc. build their content businesses. NATPE is well positioned to be that place where all content-producing media companies, old and new, can come together to meet and do business. With so many interesting people populating our three-day conference, it's possible to forget that first and foremost, NATPE is a global multi-platform transactional marketplace, a place to meet old friends and to connect with new ones. We have over 600 buyers and 300 exhibiting companies from 65 countries, including 100 new companies this year from 17 different countries, which is a good sign. As a nonprofit, we appreciate the support of old friends and new, and I want to thank all our supporters, especially Venevision and Reality Weekly and Fox International and Yahoo for supporting tonight's opening night party, which I hope you all attend around the pool at 6 o'clock, and then especially Michael Nathanson and Nomura for sponsoring our Thought Leadership Room. We really appreciate it. I want to thank the NATPE staff and our board and our friends at the Eden Rock and the Fontainebleau and the Freeman Company. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope your 3 days here will be well spent. Next year's conference will be number 50, and we plan to make it special. But for now, to kick off number 49, I want to thank Ross and John especially for changing their plans and screwing around with their almost Super Bowl Sunday, but it turned out all good for everybody. And Michael, for your support. So without further ado, let me introduce, please, from Nomura, Mr. Michael Nathanson with Ross and John. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rick. On behalf of Nomura, we're really proud to be back for the second year as sponsor of the Nomura Thought Leadership Series. And to kick it off, we're excited to reunite the former partners of Velocity Interactive Group, Ross Levinsohn and John Miller. First, Ross is Executive Vice President of the Americas region for Yahoo, and John's the Chief Digital Officer and Chairman and CEO of the Digital Media Group for News Corp. And aside from being friends and former partners, they both have a lot in common. Both have worked in sports, both worked for Rupert Murdoch, both moved early into digital media, and both have managed dominant online companies during times of great change. They also share a common love of football, and we're happy to announce that both of their teams, mine as well, are going to be in the Super Bowl. So I thought before we started, perhaps a friendly wager, because I've heard there's been wagers in the past between the two that may have not have been paid off. So let me see if we can get some kind of, like, you know, John's clam chowder for your New York steak or something.
Yeah. I think we ought to just do it here, and winner buys at Joe's. You know, you have to fly me here when you lose.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have
right.
that.
All right.
Okay, we have that documented.
I just
Okay.
go, in case you haven't, I'm the Patriots fan. They're the Giants fans.
You're surrounded.
And just on that, I just want to say that Cruz would make a good Patriot if you're following.
Yeah.
I would say it was close that both our teams would have lost yesterday, and this would have been an ugly panel.
The tough
Yeah, exactly. We would have been grumpy, really grumpy. So just before we get started, the rules of the road are we're going to do Q&A up here for a bit, but also we have a mic in the middle of the room to take your questions. So we would ask you to queue up, and I'll say like in 15 minutes, so queue up, and I'll turn to you guys during the middle of our presentation to take questions from the room. Please identify yourself, but you know, both John and Ross are here to take questions from the room as well. So please make it engaging and interactive, okay? So the first question, I'll start with John. Given all you've seen and done, and you've had a lot of different looks at media, what do you think is the single biggest lesson that you've learned along the way, and how's that lesson driving your decision-making at News Corp?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, it sounds like a cliche, but you really got to do it, which is follow consumers. Actually figure out what they're really doing, maybe not what you want them to do always, but what they're actually doing. Watch their behavior. And right now, what that leads you to at News Corp is video. I think, you know, a lot of people think that you know, sort of the video age has already happened. I think we're just beginning. And I think video consumption, by the way, the stats bear this out, is on the rise. And it's a combination of now there's all kinds of screens you can carry with you that you can view video on. Bandwidth is there. So I think we're actually just entering into the real video age now. And so more video consumption than ever before is taking place on more screens, more devices, and your strategy has to derive from that. Consumers want video. They want it wherever they are, and you got to give it to them. And that, by the way, is, again, a simple statement, but that gets into all kinds of rights issues and windowing and strategy around broadcast, around library product. But basically, you got to be there with video for the consumer. I think that's the hallmark of this time.
And Ross, have it?
Yeah, well, John and I are going to agree a lot. I'll try to find something.
Except about football.
I'll try to find something to disagree on. Look, I think what's been interesting for me over the last 25 years or so, I try to follow, similar to John, you know, I look at data, I look at insights, help drive you, similar to his, follow the consumer, and then ultimately instinct. You know, those are sort of the three things that I've always tried to think about. The other lesson that I've sort of learned wasn't necessarily a lesson, but something one of my bosses said to me about a decade ago, which has helped drive a lot of, I think, change for me, which was ask for forgiveness, not for permission. And I think in an age of dramatic change, you can't solely rely on research or solely rely on the data, which I think helps inform, but ultimately it has to be your instinct and has to be your willingness to take that chance. And I think, you know, John and I could probably both talk about this for hours. The real unique thing about Rupert is that he follows his gut you know, more than anyone else I've ever seen. And he's right a lot and he's wrong sometimes, but it leads to the change. And I completely agree with John, and it's one of the reasons I'm sitting here, because I believe we're just breaking the top layer of video, and conferences like this are really the foundation for what I think will be a really exciting future.
Okay, so let me follow up on following the consumer, because that's something we spend a lot of time thinking about too on Wall Street. In other media sectors like print and music, if you follow the consumer, you would have seen that the transition from digital delivery, from analog, really hurt the economics of those businesses. So John, with that as the setup, what are you and other TV content owners doing to now protect one ecosystem as you follow the consumer to another ecosystem? And I'll have one for you, Ross.
Yeah. So let's start with the good news, I guess, and the good news for a lot of the people here. Television is still very, very strong. Even though there's all these new forms of consumption and new ways to consume video, a lot of what they're doing is consuming television. Television isn't a screen. Television is content, right? And it goes on any screen. So I think the first thing is you realize you have that is a fundamental still consumer behavior. People love television. And by the way, I'd say television is great these days. I think overall the television product is a great product. So you have to figure out how to keep that going, because that's the thing that keeps at least all the media business, big, large media companies and all the people employed. So truthfully, you have to walk down both sides of the street. And I think an example of this is something we announced at CES a week or so ago with Xbox, where we did 2 channels that were Fox branded, so Fox Entertainment and Fox News, and those are what's called authenticated, i.e. you have to show that you're a subscriber to a cable system, let's say, or a satellite provider, so you have to be authenticated. And we introduced 2 new channels, one from IGN, a games media company that Ross bought for News Corp some years ago, and the second from the Wall Street Journal. And so we're expanding, in that example, we're expanding the Wall Street Journal's activities into video, consistent with my theme. So we walk down both sides of that street. We're saying for the kind of assets that have typically been in the bundle that people use for pay television, we're continuing to support that. At the same time, we're expanding and giving people more, in line with my thesis that people want to consume more, and we want to be there where they want to consume.
Okay. If we're looking at the ecosystem, and in many ways we like what we see on the television side, we want to keep it going, what are you doing at Yahoo to maybe disintermediate the healthy models that both John and I enjoy?
Yeah, well, look, we're not encumbered, which is great for us. It also can be a curse because it allows you to do anything. One thing we focused on, really starting about a year ago here, I had just joined Yahoo, and Yahoo, I think for 17 years is known as sort of a catch-all for everything, and I do think you have to pick your fights. And we've narrowed our focus as it relates to video on premium. It's an amazing age in that you can pick up an iPhone or a Flip or any type of camera. Anyone can do it, shoot anything they want, free software on the web, edit it, put it up, post it anywhere, and you're a creator. That's the great news about today. The bad news about today is, the notion of scarcity doesn't exist, because there really isn't any scarcity of total video. What there is scarcity of is good video, premium, and everybody has a different definition. I joke about this all the time, but I like watching the cat on the skateboard chasing the laser pointer like everyone else, but it's impossible to monetize, and if I were a big premium brand advertiser, not sure I'd want my name next to that. So recognizing that, or having a belief in that, and looking at the data, we've narrowed our focus around premium video. Now, that means in many instances we're going to partner with, hopefully, people like John. We announced a deal with ABC News in October that has just been gangbusters for us, where we're partnering with premium producers. So we sit here in Miami with really an amalgamation of great creators, and we have a platform that touches 700 million people. And I think that it's going to be probably a dual track. We're certainly doing advertising supported today. Announced a big deal with Tom Hanks last week at CES for a 90-minute series that he's voicing, creating, starring in, and we're gonna do many more of those. I do think it's incumbent on all of us in this room, and certainly John and I and our alike, to figure out the dual revenue stream, because there is that opportunity of over the top.
You want to talk about
Yeah, I think Ross's focus on the premium space is the right one. First of all, it's the one that's up for grabs, and that is a battleground, and it's a battle worth fighting. So Yahoo, Microsoft's doing some things. YouTube is getting very much channelized, and I've talked in other venues about the channelization of the web, which I think is a big event in 2012. Hulu, which we're a part owner of, is obviously in that race and in that hunt as well, and is only about premium video. So I think that's one of the big battlegrounds in the digital area, for this year, is to get your place in the sun in premium video, which will be around really good content. It won't be around, as Ross said, around cat skateboarding. It'll be around really good content, the type of content that you associate with television and other venues.
Well, let me follow up on the premium video question, or the point. Again, we're thinking about the different models. The benefit of broadcast TV has always been is the first window. You amortize your investment in premium content in the first window, then you make back money in the second and third windows. Who has the advantage in premium video creation now? Do your economics of your model, ad support, give you a disadvantage versus a model where maybe it starts upstream first? So how do you see that the sourcing of premium video?
I think he who can pay the most money has the advantage.
Right.
And so there's different answers to that question. I'd say Netflix is probably, in a pole position today. I was half joking with some friends in LA last week who were probably sitting here today, that if someone showed up, if the three of us got a company together and Nomura went out and raised us $4 billion, and we showed up and said, we have $4 billion to spend, and we're going to distribute it on our own platform, I think we'd get any deal that was available. Right. So, but I do think you have, and I think that leads to a really challenging question and position for the big media companies today, which the difference between a Google and a Facebook, or even an Apple today, and a News Corp, a CBS, a Disney, who are really trying to manage their quarterly businesses. And frankly, it looks from afar that Google doesn't really care about its quarter. It cares about its life. And, so you have to have a path of responsibility and then a path of innovation. And this, to me, this year is a bit of a tipping year because, the media companies can enable a Netflix or enable an HBO 2 decades ago, or enable, whatever's going to be next. Or in John's case today, you have an asset in Hulu that is truly an asset. So you have to decide, do you want to take the check or do you want to take the asset? And that's a challenge that we don't have, that really John has.
And, I'll put John on the spot for the industry because what I see is that maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago, even with AOL Time Warner, there was a bet by a company to bet on a digital future. News Corp, you guys did it when you were at News Corp. You've now done it at News Corp too. Where do you see our, let's say, traditional media business in terms of their willingness to take those chances versus where we are now? So how would you see it, John?
Well, first of all, it is difficult because the historical pairings have not done great, and Jeff Zucker was credited with the line, I don't want to turn analog dollars into digital dimes. So you don't want to get too far ahead of that curve. So I think this is really very much about market timing. Because there's no question that consumer behavior is changing. There's more devices to view great experiences on. There's more bandwidth. So it is changing. That's a fact. And you can see it any way you want to look at it. And part of what, to Ross's point, you got to use your intuition about and your instinct about is the market timing of it. And I don't think we're yet at a point where you would say walk away from your existing model and only do the news. So you have to walk and chew gum if you're in a big media company right now. The interesting thing about Hulu is that it not only works that it's premium television, that people come and want to see it, but that it has a dual revenue stream, different than Netflix. So Netflix has a single revenue stream subscription. Hulu has ad-supported and subscription. And that comes the closest to replicating the models that have sustained the industry so far. And in that sense, I think is in a really interesting position.
And you mentioned dual revenue. You mentioned subscription before. John answered. Then I want to come back to the subscription. What can you do at Yahoo to kind of replicate that dual revenue stream? Because even broadcast TV now has dual revenue streams, right, with retrans.
Yeah, look, I think I like where we sit as a company because we've amassed 730 odd million users. That is not an easy thing to do. So for all the heat that my company gets, no one sort of downplays the fact that we have a large audience. It's what you do with that audience. And so if I think of us as part distributor, part creator, part aggregator, curator, I like that position, and I like sitting down with people like John and his competitors because we can offer that platform. We also have a huge sales force. Right. So but we have to come up with that second revenue stream, whether it's transactional, whether it's subscription, whether it's a one-day pass for a series of shows. And it's fun to be able to experiment. And look, I think the notion, old media, new media, we should really wipe that away finally. Because you can't be in the media business today and not be in the digital media business. Yeah. And it encompasses three core things. You have to have these things. You have to have scale, whether you own it or you partner with people who have it, us, Facebook, YouTube. You have to have data, because everything today is being driven by data. The advertising return on investment is driven by data. Personalization is driven by data. The future of everything we do has to be about authenticated user, so we know who you are, being able to deliver a better experience because we know who you are, and optimizing the monetization of that. And the third thing you have to have is great content, because content is the one distinguishing factor of any channel. If you have something, as John said, people will come to it. Mad Men, Idol, House, CSI, not to leave any network out, Boardwalk Empire. If you have something unique, audiences will find it, because big audiences end up really discerning what's right and what's wrong.
One of the things Ross said is really worth, a number of things are worth pausing on, but one that I'll pause on, which is 730 million users for Yahoo. You now have these enormous global platforms that never existed before. Facebook reports 800 million. Facebook 800 million, YouTube another 800 million. So I mean, you're talking about numbers that will be in the billions pretty soon. So you're talking about global scale of media platforms. And again, to Ross's point, you shouldn't think that one's old media and one's new media. It's just global scale of media delivery platforms. That has never existed before in our world, and it's going to have an extraordinary impact. Where you can go to one guy, in this case, you can go to Ross, and you can make a deal that could literally get you to 700 million people around the world. That's never been possible, and you can do the same in a few, not too many, which is also relevant, but a few other places. And so, as a company that primarily considers itself a content company, you have to be tremendously mindful of that, which is both a question of how do you produce the stuff that goes into these platforms, but how do you also maintain the terms of trade that you want to maintain that support your business going forward. And that's a tricky issue.
Okay. Something that we debate a lot is advertising on the web and the monetization engine, okay? If you looked at the classic charts of time spent with media, you see time spent rising with internet and advertising dollars rising, but there's still a huge gap between time spent with internet and dollars spent with internet. You mentioned your three keys, but why has there been it's been quick, but it's still a huge variance between the potential. So what's kept, both you guys, what's kept it?
John and I, we spent a lot of time talking about this when we were partners and investing in companies. We saw Jordan Levin earlier, we were an investor in Generate, and Lance Podell at Next New. We thought that, I would say, we probably both thought the dollars would have moved faster.
Yes.
I mean, you just can't look at these stats and say, you've got really a 2-to-1 variance in time spent on the internet and dollars spent on the internet. And having spent much of the last year with the big agencies and marketers, I think it's coming. I don't know that we're going to hit a year where there's going to be this ridiculous hockey stick, but we are poised to see a dramatic shift in dollars moving to premium video in understandable formats, 15s, 30s, mid-rolls, pre-rolls, post-rolls, engaging social tools around it, so we're doing the paid, earned, and owned media. I think the next couple, 2-3 years, you're going to see a pretty double-digit percentage shift of ad dollars from traditional platforms to digital platforms. And that doesn't necessarily mean the PC. It could mean the iPad or the tablet. It could mean the phone. So I think it's here. I really do. Again, I don't think we're going to see, oh, gosh, we just moved 20 billion over. But over the next couple of years, I think you will. But it has to land somewhere that's easy to understand, easy to find, with analytics to support. Because a buyer wants to see that spot. It is so hard to break through with a, LREC banner on the web. But you put a beautiful, like we've been working on this living ad idea on the tablet, and it is full motion, beautiful, interactive. When you can do that, and an advertiser can go to his boss and say, I just put this brand in front of house on all devices, and you can actually see it. That's the problem with the web. You tell your boss you bought an ad on the web, good luck trying to find it, right? So you actually need to have discernible locations that you can point to.
Yeah, so a couple of things, and Ross, right, we spent a lot of time on this. One is that if you look at television time spent to dollars spent, it's pretty even. It's basically just about 1 to 1. If you look at time spent and consumption of, say, print media and dollars, it's not 1 to 1. There's more dollars than time and consumption. So it's pretty likely that's where the money is coming from, which goes back to my thesis of be in the video business. And that's why we're pushing things like the Wall Street Journal to be more in the video business. Two things I think need to happen for Ross's prediction to come true, which I think will happen. One is you have to figure out standards and measurements so that you can really reconcile, if you're an agency, you can really plan and reconcile your campaigns. And there's an ease of buying, as he was saying, across these different media. And then you can just buy house wherever house is. And that's starting to happen. It hasn't happened, beautifully yet, but it's starting to happen. And I think over the next couple of years gets sorted. The second is there's a sort of, on the internet side, there's kind of a deeper thing that's going on about whether you're buying environment or you're buying just audience. And what that means is, do I care about how, what's around my advertising versus do I care just about response from, men 18 to 34? And if you just care about audience, it depresses the CPMs. And the internet sort of has this battle going on, but as more premium stuff becomes available and those environments really become different than the other environments, I think that will bring the higher CPMs along with it, and that'll start to even these numbers out.
I mean, it's funny because all the analysis we've done, even post-recession, clearly shows that TV's come back strong.
Yeah.
And the print dollars are dropping, obviously, and they're going to digital. And at some point, though, you're going to hit a place where you can't get any more dollars out of print. It's got to come from video.
Well, I think it does. I mean, if you look at all the analysts' reports, or at least some of them that seem to be the leading indicators, all of it says, next 5 years, there's about a 38% CAGR on video dollars, video display growing on digital platforms. That can't all come from print. It's going to come from television. But if you're sitting in a chair that John's sitting in, I think they're doing the right thing. They're starting to take their existing assets and create new assets with brands that are discernible and move them across. So it doesn't mean those dollars are all coming to the existing incumbents in digital. It means they're coming to places that have aggregated large audiences, can deliver the data and return, and make it easy, instead of buying. Laura Desmond at Starcom said last week at CES, John and I were at dinner with her, that generally people only do 7 things. And so you want to be one of those 7, and I think clearly Yahoo's one of those 7. And so she believes more dollars are going to go to the big aggregators of audience. So again, if you have that, just as the networks have had it forever, that's where the dollars go.
And your point on premium, though, it's funny, when you look at the confluence of ad networks and increased inventory, that the economics of buying video, anything on the web, are advantage to the guy buying it usually because he's got a ton of inventory.
Choice, yeah.
So how is the inventory issue going to play itself out, or just the ability to drive
But that's what
pricing?
I'm saying, that I think today that's right. That's what I'm saying. There's an ability to get to an audience if you want to get to an audience. But if you want to get to an audience in a premium environment, which will speak to your brand values and hopefully speak to response, then there are fewer places to go to, and that's what I think the battleground is. So I think Yahoo's trying to create that. Ross can speak to that, but certainly an example of that is Hulu, which gets network television or better CPMs on the web for those programs.
Yeah, I want to make sure that when a premium brand buys an ad on a Yahoo platform, anyone, that they know what they're getting. I think there's risk in throwing your ad up on a page of party pictures and people throwing up, after a late night. I mean, having sat and overseen one of those, as John did.
Okay, having done that.
It's dangerous. I mean, and it was always the tough sell.
Hell
we
of a
had.
brand building environment.
It was a tough thing to walk into an advertiser and say, hey, put $1 into MySpace, until we actually created what we sort of marketed as safe, well-lit areas. You know, and I think if you're a brand, you may go for cheapest price, just for, you know, bulk, but when you really want to launch a brand, it's going to go to safe environments, premium canvases, premium content, and we're seeing that.
You know, if people have questions, you can queue up now. I'll turn to you. Following that, what's Facebook's appeal if you are the marketer, having lived through experiences where maybe you're on the party picture, you're on my summer trip last summer, and you pop up as an ad.
Yeah.
So what's your Facebook appeal when you guys are out there competing with Facebook for dollars? What's their pitch in, given all the experience with social media that you've seen at MySpace?
Yeah, look, I think Facebook's a very different business than Yahoo. I mean, we're both on the web, but they're running a very different business. We're running a premium business, and I think they're running a return on investment business. And they've done remarkably well. Although I do believe they'll face their own hurdles. John and I have talked about this a lot. There's no question. We did it at MySpace. The first couple of years were just fun. You know, MySpace had to be on everyone's buy, just as Facebook has to be on everyone's buy. But after the second or third cycle with an advertiser, if the ads aren't returning, the advertisers start questioning, which happened at MySpace. And I think it's happening at Facebook in spots. The difference with Facebook, and I talked about it earlier, is they've done a tremendous job honing and wiring the data that they have on their users to a point where it's very predictable for them. And I think there's no question you'll see them move to different formats, and that becomes that's going to be a Rubicon for them, because we had this discussion a lot at News Corp when I was there. I believe that my MySpace page at the time, and frankly my Facebook page, is mine. It's not theirs. I do it on their platform, but it's my page. And there's no question timeline, that big picture that's now appeared, that it's a picture of my friends on my page, there's no question they're going to turn that into an ad. And I'm not sure I want that. That's my page. I actually don't want my friends thinking I'm associated with pick an advertiser, unless I want it. But they have to come up with new formats for it to go to the next decibillion,
Right.
you know,
And to make us happy.
and to make everyone happy.
Exactly. Now let me ask you, you mentioned premium video. Going back to that, Ross, if you looked at traditional linear TV, let's say, and consumption, what genres do you think are ripe for moving consumers to the web? So when you look at where you're going to place your bets on premium video,
Yeah.
what genres are you picking off?
Well, let me sort of throw a couple things out. One, I think the things that I think the web are really challenging, the one in particular is news. You know, I think by the time you get to the 6 o'clock or 11 o'clock or nightly news, the cycles are so fast now. So I think the web has done a really good job there. I like the ability to interact with things. And, you know, we bought a company last year that I think is here this week called Into Now, which is doing really true interactive social interaction with shows. So, you know, literally it listens to the technology listens to what's on the TV, creates a really cool environment on your iPad, iPhone, Android device, and you can interact with your friends. Works great for things like the Golden Globes. We just did a big program there. It works great yesterday for sporting events. So I think two-way interactivity around premium programming, big. And so to that effect, I think reality shows will work. Where I think we can all play both good and good is scripted. You know, I don't think it's easy to do good scripted television. I really don't. And so I think that's best left in the hands of people in this room. And we should be supporters of that and funders of that and really build an audience with it. The last bastion of success for traditional television will be sports. Yeah. You cannot, I mean, it'll move to these platforms, but there's nothing like sitting on your couch and watching yesterday's game. It's a great experience. The quality of the picture's getting better. The replay, I mean, some of the stuff Fox was doing yesterday, and that ball hit the receiver's leg, and they zeroed in. I mean, it's truly remarkable. And it doesn't have that same effect on a phone, right? And so I think sports, because the outcome is always in doubt in sports, you have to watch it live. And the rights fees are so high that I'm not sure a digital distributor is going to get there anytime soon.
And John, do you agree?
Yeah, I certainly agree about sports. In some ways, it's the thing that maybe holds the firewall against, the current model, that wall coming down in a real way, because people like apparently this panel will pay for sports. I think another thing that's interesting that's happening is if you look at what YouTube's channel effort seems to be, and they announced 40 or 50 channels in the fall, those are channels that are, to my mind, legitimate concepts that don't quite make it to what you might have considered to be the cable dial, right, or the cable or satellite dial. They're just the next, sort of level out than what would be sustainable in that model. They're not way down in, the cat skateboarding world. They're just a little bit outside of what would make it onto cable in what was supposed to be the 500-channel universe, if you remember all that expression. It seems like that's what's now happening on the web. So to me, I think what's interesting about that is just like when cable started and everyone who's in the broadcast business said, well, those are silly concepts. Who wants to, see a kids channel or frankly a 24-hour news channel? And they started really slow and they took a little bit of share over time and then a little bit more and a little bit more. The question is, will that happen again? Will these types of concepts, which YouTube is doing, which Ross is doing at Yahoo, which Microsoft is doing, introducing new stuff, will they start to each just take, over time, the ones that survive, not all will survive, take a little bit of share, and over time start to build up? And that at least would be the history of this business, that could happen. Because those are concepts that are valid, but they're not by definition, they're not American Idol. They're not meant to be 50 million viewer at an appointment television, one time, one place kind of thing. They're meant to be slivers that appeal to a very specific audience in a high-quality environment. I think it remains to be seen, but history would suggest that could happen.
You know what? Let me follow up on Netflix, because you didn't mention Netflix in that array. But do you think Netflix, who now has a real presence here, over the years they just increased. If you look at Netflix's model, you would say the first wave looks like early cable, right? So they bought syndicated programming, older stuff. I mean, 5 years from now, what does Netflix look like in your mind versus what it looks like now? Is it going to follow the same type of...
All right, so a few things on Netflix. All right, so first of all, they obviously had a tough second half of 2011, probably by any way. They still got 20 million subs, right? So nobody should be writing any epithets for Netflix just yet. Second, I gave a talk in Hollywood about 2 years ago when nobody would sell to Netflix. I said, this was in LA and Hollywood, I said, guess what? People in this town have a way of warming to other people with checks. And Netflix came in with the checks and they got the product. So they're going to continue, if they can continue to write checks, they'll continue to get product. What product are they going for? This is the interesting thing to me. They started as a film library service. They're essentially now competing for close to current season television, right? That is a real shift. The battleground, I believe, in the industry has shifted from film library product to television product and getting closer and closer to current season, which, by the way, is the bailiwick of Hulu. So they're buying recent series, recent television series. And all their viewership numbers show that that's where the battleground is. That's what people are watching on Netflix. Because, you can, if you get a series you like I'm catching up on The Wire because I had missed it, that's 5 seasons or 6 seasons of, many hours of programming as opposed to one film. When I get hooked, you got me. You got me for a lot of time to get through that. So the battleground has shifted from what they were in to television. And so probably good news, by the way, for the producers here in this room, because there's going to be a lot of demand for that product. But I think that's where the battleground is, and I think in a few years what you'll see is Netflix really going for as close to current as they can and trying to cherry pick, because you can't afford to buy everything, trying to cherry pick the shows and the series that they believe they need to drive their business, and I believe their business will be driven by television.
And Ross, who gets hurt from that?
I'm sorry?
Who gets hurt from that progression?
Well, I mean, you'd have to say the traditional distributors, so maybe the cable operators or the satellite operators today, although I think they're in a pretty good position. I mean, the Netflix story is an interesting one. I view them as a marketing company. I mean, they go back to my theme of data. they have amazing data on people and are able to, do what Amazon, I think, invented, frankly. Oh, if you watch this, you'll like this. And one of the things I saw at CES was there's now software that's embedding that in televisions. So if you're actually watching The Wire, and it will market to you, you may also like Die Hard, and we heard this. And if you like Die Hard, by the way, there's a new movie coming out from 20th Century Fox, Die Hard. And you can buy the box set, but you can watch it digitally, streaming. So I think they've done a good job there. I also think what we all have to recognize that in the history of this country, there's kind of a ceiling for subscription. It's about 35 million users. So if you view that as the top end, they got to 22, 23 before they stumbled a little bit last year. But that's still a lot. And that's a viable business. John's point is right. They came with a checkbook and people warmed to them. So I do think it might hurt. But look, I think you're watching The Wire. I've become a carousel TV watcher. What I mean by that is I watch entire seasons, right, almost at once, like in a very short period of time, because we're all, running around like crazy, so we don't have the time. But I'll carousel. The first one I did this with was Friday Night Lights, and I just was addicted and rolled through 5 seasons. I'm now I never watched Sons of Anarchy on FX. I always wanted to. I didn't have time. I'm now carouseling Sons of Anarchy. And I'll move to Breaking Bad, and I'll finish The Wire.
But this is my point. This is
what's happening. Yeah. And so who's done it right besides Netflix? HBO. They got it right with HBO Go. It's a fantastic product. Yep. It's protecting their core business. Yep. You got to be authenticated. You got to be a subscriber. It doesn't alienate them to Comcast or Direct or Time Warner Cable. And I am engrossed in television programming more so than I've ever been.
Okay, so let me ask you this question. Both of you guys represent the whole universe of media. Why haven't other companies figured out what Netflix figured out, which is people like checks, right? So why haven't you seen, we're waiting for Amazon, Apple, Google to start writing bigger and bigger checks, and people in Hollywood will take those checks. So why has there been...
I have an answer.
Okay.
Okay, so the first thing is Netflix runs close to the wind, right? They spend a lot of money, and depending on how you look at the math, if their subscriber growth stalls or whatever, they could have some difficulties. So they're willing to do that. But I think the bigger answer is Netflix is in the video business. It only has one business. It sells access to a bundled video or television and film programming, and that's their business. When you look at these other guys, like you mentioned, like Google or Amazon, Apple, they're in other businesses. Apple's job is to sell really expensive, really good, and hardware, right? That's their job. So content to them is just a means to do that other thing. It's not the thing like it is in Netflix's business. It's to do another thing. And if they can keep the cost of content to the consumer as low as possible and the hardware cost as high as possible, they've done their job. Google's trying to do something else, which is sell advertising to people. And if they can make all the content free, that's a perfect world, and then they can sell advertising on top of it. So you have very different motivations that come to whether or not they want to write those kinds of checks. But essentially, the biggest difference is those companies make money on something else for which they use content to get to that something else. And Netflix, like the traditional businesses like DirecTV or Comcast traditionally, make money on the video bundle. Right? Now, the reason I said traditionally is, remember now, the cable guys got a second business called broadband provisioning. That's a higher gross margin business than the video business. So for the first time now, you have your traditional distributors of your networks who have an incentive to be in another business, not any longer just in your business, where you're in together. You might argue with each other about rates and take out ads and all that kind of stuff when there's a fight, but in the end, it always got resolved. But now you have another business. They are like those, like the guys I mentioned, like Apple and so on, who have another business to support, and that's new and different, and remains to be seen how that plays out.
I'd ask you this question, right. Because I think the big media companies today actually have gotten it. I think they're moving in that direction, and they've gotten it. Okay. And do you care, as do you think Wall Street cares if Time Warner, if their revenue split, if their revenue generation, the model changes, and more of it's coming from new platforms, you'll probably value them higher than you would today. And I think we're seeing that move happen.
Yeah, I would say thanks for asking the question. I would say 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we were very afraid that the industry didn't know how to transition, didn't know how to monetize those three factors you talk about. But you mentioned HBO Go, ESPN Watch ESPN, which is a great product, right?
Even Fancast at Comcast, and,
Right.
and Cablevision's doing some amazing stuff.
Right.
So I think they're getting it.
I think they're getting it too, and I think what they've done, and I know Ted Sarandos tomorrow is talking with Gaspin here in the afternoon, but I think how they've dealt with Netflix has been smart, which is, okay, we'll sell you this, but we won't sell you the first season. We'll keep that in a separate window. And I think if the checks get big enough, then they will debate, okay, maybe we'll take that money for the first season and a half.
In our case with Netflix, we also got the right to create or bring back some series that had fallen off television.
Right.
So if you followed it with Netflix, we're doing a new series of Arrested Development, which had stopped on television. It ended its run, but now will continue on Netflix. Yeah. So we're using it in part to finance new high-quality production, which I think is another key to this whole thing, which is how do you finance new high-quality production? And can you use these emerging forms of distribution and consumption to be part of the way that you create more great stuff?
Okay. Let me turn, I know no one's standing, but if people want to ask a question, we have about 5-10 more minutes, and we can throw a question to the audience or two. Yes, sir.
Shout.
Shout. We'll translate.
Shout.
Just yell.
Yeah, don't worry.
All right, I'll shout.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
Is that better? As a content producer, I, of course, love everything you're saying. But this is my question. My fear is if I go and sell something to you, how are you going to promote it? I know how a network can promote, and they're absolute experts at it. And I don't mean just promoting on a network. I mean everything from seeing a banner when I come out of the subway in Times Square to pushing share on my iPad in the New York Times and seeing an ad, all those kinds of things that are promotions. And my fear is that if I sell to you, it just disappears. What are you thinking of in terms of how you're going to compete with, let's say, how a network or a cable company actually promotes their shows?
Yeah, well, I'll take it. That's a great one. Great question. We've taken a bit of a different strategy than some of our competitors in that we're not starting 50 channels. We're actually zeroing in on projects we think will make sense to our audience. And again, that's informed by data, and I'll give you an example in a second. And then really treating those series as we would, a hit television show or a hit movie. Marketing campaigns around them, using our platform to reach 700 million people on the web, 150 million people on mobile devices, and harnessing that data we have on people and then targeting them. So I don't know that we need to buy a bus shelter. Honestly, it's really inefficient media. What's efficient is you come to our homepage on any device. We know who you are, you're authenticated, you have a Yahoo Mail account, or by the way, you authenticated with your Facebook login on Yahoo, fine also. And we will target you because we know what your likes and dislikes are. We may not even know your name. We'll know your IP address. So as an example, with Electric City, which we announced with Tom Hanks, we are going, this will be the biggest push for us on a marketing basis, campaigns across the web, targeted campaigns to the people we think this will resonate with, and now I'll reverse it. We actually launched a female slate of programming last fall that was, it was informed by stories on Yahoo, i.e., we knew every time that we had a story about a marriage proposal on Yahoo, it clicked almost better than every other story. So we took that notion, we went to your community and said, we're looking for a project around marriage proposals. And we got one. And we knew it was going to be successful because we were informed by the data. We put it on our homepage. 35 million people a day in this country go to our homepage. We marketed it effectively. It came out of the gate the most watched new series we've ever done and has sustained. So you take the risk out of it for us, if you do less versus let's do 100, right? I really want us as a company to get behind really unique voices, and we've focused on that versus trying to do everything.
I agree, it's a great question. So I'm going to take two sides, the network side and the kind of grassroots side. So on the network side, our Fox networks, for example, spend a tremendous amount of time trying to sort through how do you promote in these new environments. When you run an app or a show is exhibited on Netflix or Hulu, do we get promotion at the end of that throws you to another Fox show or something like that? So there's a whole series of work being done around that, which is how do you keep the things that a channel or a network has historically done very well, which is promote other, sort of the continuity of it in other shows in these new environments. And so there's a whole set of work around that. Then there's another universe that's taking place around kind of grassroots organizations having nothing to do with the large media companies. But if you look on YouTube, there's some of these things that are bubbling from the bottom up. Two of the most interesting are Machinima, if you know what that is, which is in the game space, and Maker Studios, which is more general. I'm a small investor in Maker personally. Machinima has, I think, currently about 1.2 billion video views a month in its network, and Maker has about half that. So you're seeing these grassroots networks that can serve as promotional engines starting to bubble up in that environment, and that's a new phenomenon. It has nothing to do with what Google has done to date or YouTube has done to date. It happened organically. So I think you're seeing both the sort of the big picture, big ownership companies trying to figure out what a network means in the future, and at the same time there are these grassroots networks taking place, and you got to figure out how to plug into one of those if you're a producer.
Since I'm ahead with a good question here, just one final comment. This is Content Central for the next couple of days here, and yet I see YouTube is here, and I see Netflix is here, but in the exhibitor list I don't see Yahoo, and I don't see Hulu.
We're here in mass.
Yeah,
We're sponsoring tonight, and we've got people. We don't have a booth set up, but we've got people here the whole show.
Next.
Could you talk a little bit about content on a local level? So, if we produce a weekly high school sports show and syndicate it on local distribution channels in Boston, for example. So, where are those opportunities with Yahoo or News Corp to, or Fox? You've got a lot of affiliates that do local programming. How do you see that business growing, and what are the opportunities for producing content for independents?
Did I hear you're a Patriots fan?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
There's no room for
Well,
any
and I'm not
more.
answering
Giants
that
fan.
question.
Okay.
Then I demand you
I
are.
should probably take
I'll
that
still
question.
listen to you.
Well, I think, let me do the sort of the good side and then perhaps the cynical statement. The good side is I think there's tremendous room for that, particularly tied to television stations, which have not gone into in my view, not only ours, but in the industry, have not gone into the depth that they can locally by tying into organizations like the one that you represent to enhance their offerings. Because what they have is that promotional engine and that ability to drive traffic. And as an industry, I would say the television industry hasn't embraced that as fully as it could. They've just tried to sort of make their websites derivative of kind of things they have on air for the most part. And I think that's something that the industry, all of us, our company included, could do a better job. The other side, and the sort of cynical part that's been hard, is they always say local is the area of the internet with the most promise and always will be. Meaning it's hard to monetize, and no one has really, really cracked it. You see various things. Google's tried to do it its way with search. AOL's tried to do it with patch more recently. And so there's a series of things, but no one's yet found the pot of gold in local. It has to be there because people live their lives locally and engage in these things in great depth. So it has to be there, but that's why, going back to the first point, I think it has to derive from something that already exists. So I would say as an industry, the television industry, and for that matter, radio, has to embrace tying into organizations like yours better, and you got to convince them to do that.
I'll quickly add, when I sat in some version of John's chair, we bought a site called Scout, which was focused on high school and college teams. Yep. And it tied in, the notion was going to tie into the RSNs at Fox. And at Yahoo, we have a company called Rivals. Yep. Does the same thing. And so if I'm standing where you're standing, I'd be pitching Rivals and Scout for your programming, because we can both of us can distribute it directly to those markets.
Great. Thank you.
Let me take one more, and then we'll be done. How's that? Last question. Yep. That's it, huh? Okay, thank you very much. Thank you both, John, Ross, John, thank you so much. Remember that bet. We'll be back here next year.